SoFi is set to report their second quarter 2025 earnings results on Tuesday before the bell on July 29th, where they're expected to continue their streak of profitability. And since the last earnings report, the stock has done almost a 2x. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing all of my earnings predictions as we head into Tuesday. Of course, I'm going to be live streaming this event, but in this video, I wanted to talk through some of the numbers that I'm expecting them to report and why exactly I have those numbers as my predictions. Let's jump right in. Okay, so of course, I will be covering the earnings live stream as I always do on this channel before the bell. The actual earnings results come out at 7 a.m. and then they hop on the call at 8 a.m. And we're obviously going to be jumping on a live stream as early as 7 a.m. to talk through the report. We're going to be inviting people from the SoFi community. It's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely make sure to join on Tuesday, July 29th at 7 a.m. on this channel. As always, I do an earnings video with my predictions. My predictions have historically been among the closest in the retail community. They've also been among the most bullish in the retail community. And I think this quarter is going to be no different. So let me share my screen and go through some of the numbers. Okay, so this quarter, I expect SoFi to add 835,000 members. However, I do expect a 10,000 member decline since in previous quarters, we've had member declines for churned members, for example, bringing their total number to 825,000 new member additions after the deduction. You'll see that this is pretty in line with what they've added historically. It's about 7.5% quarter over quarter growth. In previous quarters, that tracks pretty closely. It's definitely within the range. And within the year over year growth rate, it's about 34.2%, which is pretty in line as well with previous quarters. So we're going to see if that number comes to fruition. Of course, it could be higher than this. We know that SoFi is going to be stair-stepping very quickly towards that 1 million member addition per quarter. And this could obviously be a sandbag member addition number, but I think 835,000 new members is what I am expecting for the business. And with regards to members, one other thing to keep in mind here is that this has been very, very nicely growing and actually accelerating in their growth because the business is reaching that point of now having the TGL, the NBA, and the NFL all working in collaboration with their marketing plan to add more members. Of course, now that they're going back into crypto, they're going to be adding more into their brokerage side of the business. So SoFi Invest is going to have more members as well. And they're going to be pumping up a lot of their marketing initiatives as well. Now, in terms of total products, I did this a little bit differently because in previous predictions, I would go off of the multiple of members to products. But in this prediction, I wanted to add another layer of difficulty. And so I wanted to actually guess what the products were going to be on a segment basis. So as I reveal this, you'll see that all the numbers that are in black are calculations and all the numbers that are in red are actually my predictions. So let's start off with the personal loan products. I put personal loans in line with what previous quarter growth rates have been at 1.6 million personal loan products. I put student loans as having about 20,000 additional products at 600,000, and then home loans at 42,000. That's pretty in line with the rate at which home loans has been growing. So just linearly extrapolating here, of course, personal loans is the largest growth. I put almost 100,000 personal loan products added in the quarter. And then as we go down to the financial services products, I put 5.95 million for the SoFi Money products, at 2.75 for the Invest products, 325 for credit card. So a modest growth, but pretty in line with previous quarters here. And I'm also going to be curious to see what the credit card growth comes in at, because we know that credit card is something that they've been actively investing in scaling. So we're going to see if that's paying some dividends down the line. Of course, referred loans is their smallest segment. And then, of course, Relay is their second largest segment. I put it at 5.5 million Relay products because they're roughly adding between 400 and 500,000 products per quarter. SoFi at Work, I also just linearly extrapolated here, only about 6,000 additions, which brings the total number to over 17 million products with 1.08 million new added. And of course, how I got that number was on a line by line basis for all of these different segments. So we can see that the 1,000,086 here is about 6.83% quarter over quarter growth, which is kind of lower than some of the previous quarters, but I think it's still in line with what we can expect them to add. If you look on the year over year basis, 33% year over year growth in products, it's very much in line with the actual member count. And if we just take the total products here and we divide it out by the total members, we can get our members to product ratio is about 1.448. And that's obviously fairly in line with what the actual ratio is. So I know that these numbers are not, completely out of the range of possibility, that somewhere in between, whether I use the old method of just looking at the multiple or the new method of actually guessing the actual individual line items, it's going to be somewhere in the range of what the reality is going to be. So the members to product ratio that I have here is 1.448 members to products after all is said and done. Of course, money being the biggest ad, relay being the biggest ad, and then on the lending side of things, personal loans being the biggest ad here. In terms of the total products here, you can see that the top growing ones are, of course, the SOFI Relay. 5.5 million products was my estimate, but the latest number came in at 5.1 million here. And then you also have SoFi Money, which is their biggest product segment here. They have about 5.47 million total products on SoFi Money, and my estimate was 5.95 million for this latest quarter. But you can see that the invest segment started out to have this very nice trajectory, but somewhere towards the middle here dwindled, and it actually declined after a certain point when they lost the crypto side of the business. And now, of course, with the crypto side of the business coming back, this is going to start to reaccelerate back into the high product growth, which is also going to account for a lot of their new members that they're going to come in, is members that they lost when they had to forfeit the crypto side of the business. So really, when you're looking at members and products, it's a story of these three: SoFi Money, SoFi Relay, and SoFi Invest. Everything else, the credit card products, the referred loans, and SoFi at Work, is very, very small by comparison to these top three segments here. Okay, so now let's move on to the tech platform. With regards to the tech platform accounts, we know that this has been somewhat spotty. I'm expecting 163 million total accounts for the tech platform in Q2, which would be about a 5 million increase year over year, as well as quarter over quarter, since it's basically the same number here. And that's been a big critique that we've had off the tech platform, is the fact that they are not growing as fast in the tech platform as in their other segments. So 163 million, adding 5 million accounts to the tech platform is definitely not the most conservative of numbers for me to be forecasting out. They could very easily come in below that number, but I think it's also aggressive enough so as not to be unrealistic, but also for them to be continuing their acceleration into the tech platform. Because management in previous quarters has said that the tech platform is really going to shine in 2026 when they're going to accelerate in that growth. So I'm just baking a very modest growth until that time comes. All right, let's now move on to the financials. So here we have the last 5 quarters with regards to the financials, and similar story here. I'm going to be guessing on a segment by segment breakdown that's going to then lead to our total revenue numbers. So let's start off with the lending financials. My number was 420 million here, and I'm assuming a growth rate in line with previous growth rates. So we had 413 million. 417, 369, so on and so forth. And this is just a modest 1%, 1.6% quarter over quarter growth rate. Now, you might be saying, well, Tevis, that's actually really low because, in fact, SoFi has been much higher than these numbers. But keep in mind that last quarter, they actually declined quarter over quarter. So, 1.6% to be adding is not crazy, but it's also not outside the realm of what they've been doing in the past. So 420 million is my lending revenue growth expectation there. Again, I think that lending is going to see a shift in how they're making money with rates coming down, because student loans are going to be accelerating, home loans are going to be accelerating, and personal loans are going to be decelerating. But we know that right now, personal loans is by far their biggest product line with regards to lending, and then home loans and student loans are a fraction of what personal loans is right now. So that's going to have a shock to the actual revenues if that continues to happen. I am still baking in a growth rate. I'm just not baking in as strong of a growth rate for lending as other people might be. I don't know. Moving on to financial services, this is, I think, by far where I am the most excited. I put 345 million for financial services, adding about 44 million there in terms of the quarter over quarter jump. 13% quarter over quarter. It would be about 95.8% growth rate year over year, which would be fantastic for the lending segment. And of course, we know that this growth is going to be powered by the loan platform business. But more importantly, as a result of that fee-based revenue, what I'm most excited about in terms of the lending segment is, in fact, the actual accelerating contribution margin that we're going to see from that business. Here we can see the acceleration in the contribution margin. And contribution margin is, of course, the contribution profit divided by the total revenue. So we can see how much they're taking home at the end of the day after the expenses are subtracted. Back in Q1 of 2024, it was 25%, Q2 is 31%, 41%, 44%, almost 49% here. I am expecting over 50% in contribution margin, which would continue the rate of acceleration in the contribution margin. I think that's the most exciting part of the financial services growth story, because on the back of that loan platform business, they're keeping more of their money. It's fee-based revenue, and they also have operating leverage off of that. The expenses are not increasing at the same rate in which the revenue is increasing. And that's a telltale sign of a very healthy business, of a business that's very financially stable. And so I think we're going to see over 50% in contribution margin for the financial services segment. And if and when we do, that's going to be really amazing, right? Because not only will we have acceleration in the growth rates of SOFI as an entirety of a business, but we'll also have like almost triple digit growth rates in financial services on the back of the loan platform business. So this is the number that I'm most excited about, and it's probably going to be one of the more bullish estimates out there from people because it warrants it. But if you look at previous quarters and how they've been growing, it's not actually outside the realm of possibility, adding 40 million accounts. They basically did that last quarter. They've done that in previous quarters as well. Moving on to the tech platform financial is the most underwhelming part of this entire growth story. I said 105 million. Like I said before, management mentioned that this would really pick up in 2026 as early as the first quarter. So right now I'm baking in very modest expectations. I don't have anything really crazy here for the technology platform. Of course, the quarter over quarter growth rate would be about 1.5%. The year over year growth rate, which I haven't done and I should do for future videos of this nature, is about 10% year over year for the technology platform, assuming 105 million. Of course, we don't know if they're going to come in at 105. They could come in lower. I wouldn't be surprised. Like if you look at the growth rate for the tech platform here, it's very, very modest. Okay, now let's move on to corporate revenue. This is totally a shot in the dark guess. I have no idea what corporate revenue is going to come in at, but I was just putting in a number within the range of what we have previously. So I did minus 20 million for corporate revenue here, which brings our total revenue to 850 million. Analysts are, of course, expecting $804 million for revenue. So this is tangibly higher than what analysts are forecasting. And as we move down to adjusted EBITDA here, I put 242 million for adjusted EBITDA. 850 million for total revenue would be a roughly 5.7% beat on analyst expectations. Which is in line. If you look at some of their other beats, they beat revenue generally by single digits. The EBITDA margin, I put this at 28.5. Initially, I struggled with this because when they provided guidance for full year 2025, they were saying that they were going to reinvest back into the growth. And so I thought that they were going to be spending more and the EBITDA margin would actually decline. But what we saw in the first quarter was that the EBITDA margin actually increased relative to Q4 and has been increasing for the last several quarters. So 22%, 23, 26, 27. And then I put 28.5 here as the EBITDA margin that we can expect for Q2 2025. Not sure if that's going to be coming in, but that's what dictated the EBITDA number here. And then in terms of net income, my estimate was 90.1 million at a 10.6% margin. Of course, this also assumes an acceleration in the net income margin. You should ignore this number because that's the GAAP number that we have. I'm still working on these charts of building them out actively. So some of the data is not going to be the most accurate here. And you can see that a lot of the historical data is just missing because I still have to fill it in. In previous quarters, they've had single digit net income margin, and I put them at very, very, very low double digits. That brings out our EPS to about 8 cents EPS. Now, the guidance is for 6 cents EPS. So, of course, I'm having them triple beat this quarter as well. They've had a history of triple beating for like the last 3 years. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually continue to triple beat. In terms of the guidance, I think a lot is going to be hinging on the guidance. I expect them to continue to be conservative. I expect them to continue to talk about profitability as their main focus for the business. That's just in their DNA of how they guide for numbers. It's the sandbags that allow them to outperform when earnings time comes. And I think a lot of that is going to be baked in. It's also going to be interesting because in recent earnings reports and fireside chats, they've actually been very aggressive with the guidance for the loan platform business, assuming a lot of growth there and guiding for a lot of growth. Those two worlds are going to collide, them wanting to be financially conservative with regards to their guidance and them being excited for the growth of the loan platform business. So we're going to see what they say on their earnings call. Finally, in terms of the stock price, we're going to see if there's a pullback. In previous quarters, there has been a pullback where the stock sort of runs in the pre-market and then pulls back intraday. Generally speaking, SOFI has run following earnings, and they run obviously in leading up to earnings, which is what we've seen in the stock price over the past couple of weeks. We'll see what happens. Like I said before, I will be covering the earnings results live on my channel on Tuesday, July 29th, pre-market at 7 a.m. So make sure to join. There's going to be a lot of people there. It's going to be fun. We're going to be inviting people from the SOFI community, and we're all going to be listening to the earnings call together. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know what you think of these numbers, if you agree or disagree in the comments below. I'd love to see them. I read every comment. Thanks so much again. See you next time.